Earth, a Love Story, written and read by Robin Lassiter. Chapter 6. The bad news is you're falling through the air. Nothing to hold on to, no parachute. The good news is there's no ground. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. First, the green sphere presented to teach me that whatever feeling I focused on became my reality. I'm having a normal, run-of-the-mill dream, and suddenly it rushes down to me, a light, alive, vibrant, glowing emerald, getting closer and closer. I plant my feet, determined to not let fear overwhelm me. It gets closer and closer, and when it is so close that I can only see green, I feel myself engulfed, lifted. There is a brief sense of unconsciousness, as if I've fallen asleep within the dream for just a moment, and then I'm inside. We are in the forest. Not exactly in my childhood valley, but in the same area. Pinyon and juniper and cactus and yucca. The air is dry and warm and fragrant with sage. Tiny pinyon needles carpet the ground, and dusty, periwinkle blue juniper berries gather in little depressions on lichen-painted rock. I know this land well. I know the short, scrubby buffalo grass and the giant cobalt sky full of bright white swelling afternoon clouds. The world is the same as in my waking life, except it is overlaid by a gentle, electric green. I feel like I am inside the sphere, but I can't see the edges. It simply colors me and everything around me. There's a definite presence here too, unseen but clearly felt. Masculine, peaceful, patient, steady, above me and to the right. When I sense him, I become overjoyed. So much joy that it almost physically hurts. The joy is stretching me, changing me, rearranging me from the inside, and I bear it as long as I can, and then it's like I can't stretch anymore. I'm a balloon that pops suddenly, and I fall. The presence is instantly gone, and now I'm terrified. The more I focus on the fear, the more I become the fear. I am confused, panicking, and afraid I'm going crazy. The green world gets dark and heavy, and I stumble through the landscape, grasping and gasping. I feel the tips of sharp, jabbing pinyon needles when I put my hand out to brace myself, and the world is hot and dry and relentless. I look down at my hand and somehow also look right through it. I'm invisible, and this terrifies me even more. I see my dogs nearby in the woods, and I call out to them. Where normally they would come smiling and swaying their heads and trotting over to me, now they completely ignore me. It's like I'm not even there. This sends me into a full, gasping panic, and then, thank God, the masculine presence returns and telepathically reminds me that this place is for training. I'm not trapped here. He suggests I cast my gaze to the heavens, and when I do, I feel an immediate sense of exaltation, safety, and that overwhelming bursting joy. There is a definite sense of up, of lifting, of greater light available, and of lucidity and coherence. The world around me gets softly brighter. I notice tiny yellow flowers near my feet. The pine needles are still there, but now when I reach out to touch them, they are velvet. I can feel every detail of them. The tiny sharp points, tipped orange, but bending gently now instead of stabbing. They are springy and bursting with green sappy life. I look over and see my dogs sniffing out bunny trails in the oak brush. I am hesitant, but I whistle. They instantly turn to me and bound over, and when I bend down to pet them, they roll over me and lick my face and hands and squirm around on my lap, elated to be with me. I visit these extremes again and again. The whole thing has an oddly biblical quality. There's a gnashing of teeth at one end of the spectrum, and an exhilarating rapture on the other. I thrash back and forth between these two states of being with a complete lack of grace. I'm like a child learning to walk, and my efforts are jerky and inelegant, but earnest. I practice and practice. It's like strengthening a muscle that I've never used. It is exhausting. I awaken from these dreams and spend the rest of the day in bed, staring numbly at a book or the television, unable to even ruminate on what had happened. It feels like I'm being opened up to contain more. My edges are being stretched, and the space within me is getting bigger, and I'm learning to navigate it. One night during the green sphere training, I had a rich, vivid dream. Jimmy Fallon had discovered the teachings of Don Miguel Ruiz and went to study with him. He and Don Miguel put on a seminar, a presentation, and I went to hear them speak. Along with Jimmy Fallon and Don Miguel, there was a Nagual sorceress that looked like Emmylou Harris, Carlos Castaneda's Don Juan, Caipacha, and many others, shadowy figures milling around in the background, watching. One by one they approached me. Don Miguel got close and looked directly into my eyes. He told me about how water is part of the earth and how it is sacred. It is drying up and we need to help. The Nagual woman put her bony fingers, heavy with silver rings, onto my shoulders and talked to me about the suffering of animals. Don Juan told me about the trees who are guardians and how they need our protection. I definitely had the feeling that I was being scolded for not doing what I was supposed to be doing. They weren't too pleased with me, but as each of them spoke to me with a deep, solemn weight, Jimmy Fallon danced around them and made faces at me over their shoulders. He caught my eye when they got very serious and mocked their speech, shaking his finger dramatically and silently mouthing words. He played intermediary and comic relief on my behalf, and it lightened the whole mood. He even made Don Juan laugh, and by the end they weren't too hard on me. As the dream closed, they were standing in a semicircle around me, eyebrows raised. "Now that you are paying attention again," they said, "what are you going to do about it?" This dream served the dual purpose of relaxing me a little, letting me lighten up, while simultaneously highlighting the seriousness of my training. What was I going to do about the water and the animals and the trees? I didn't have any damn idea. The purple sphere is, blessedly, more pleasant, less gnashing of teeth, less being stretched open from one extreme to the other. There's a scholastic, academic feeling to it. It starts the same. I'm dreaming some regular, boring dream, and the beautiful amethyst orb approaches me, getting closer and closer as I look up, standing my ground. This time, instead of passing out and reawakening inside, I see the sphere flex around me like surface tension on water, and suddenly I pop inside. The world is lilac and beautiful. The light and color again overlay the landscape. It is completely clear to me that I am inside of the sphere. I can see its edges, and we are moving through the world together. A feminine figure, bookish and erudite, with her head bowed thoughtfully, long purple robes rustling against the ground, hands clasped gently behind her back, appears next to me. She is the picture of a dedicated monk, except for the wild, electric gray hair bounding from her head, hinting at a sense of humor. Another wink to me that this isn't to be taken so very seriously. She communicates with me telepathically. She tells me that this purple light is actually a frequency, a specific dimension, a resonance available and existing concurrently with my own. I look around. The world is the same, except for it is bathed in this glowing lilac light, and except for the way that I feel. I can see everything with clarity. particularly myself, my ego, my preferences and fears. There is no blame or anger or self-pity. I can see how my life experiences have shaped me to be this way or that. I see how we are all connected, a huge tapestry of experience, and how we play roles for each other for our or another's growth, and that it's all fine and that's the way it's meant to be. I could choose to be in this space or any other, and one isn't necessarily better or worse. It's more a degree of comfortability, and that was totally up to me. How uncomfortable does this have to get? The world, the reality that we're all hanging out in when we're here on this planet, doesn't have a preference one way or the other. It just reacts to free will. It is as if choice itself creates the space, and even though it is the same backdrop, it is also a literal new landscape. We walk along a gently ascending stone path, the orb that we're inside of matching our pace, moving quietly along with us. We are near the sphere's edge and can see both inside and outside at the same time. As we walk, the grasses and flowers and trees and even insects are transformed by the light, becoming higher, more vibrant, and rarefied versions of themselves. Up ahead, I see something writhing on the ground. I glance at my teacher and she motions that I should approach. I look down and a huge spider, a hairy black tarantula, is writhing in pain, flipping itself around, legs akimbo. All of the tiny hairs on its legs and body are outlined in the same gentle purple glow, but it is clearly not okay. I can feel that it is emanating anger and pain and lashing out with its energy. In a moment, it stops moving. Its wild thrashing has landed it on its back, and its legs curl up and in, and the life force drains away. Now it's just a dead shell. My eyes are wide, and I look at my teacher. She explains to me that this is just a metaphor. This is not a literal spider. Spiders, of course, aren't bad or dark or angry, and I know that. She used this imagery to show me that there are some things that simply can't exist within this frequency. I understand the lesson, and it's further brought home as we continue on. Up ahead, I see a friend standing outside of the sphere. She can't see the light. She can't see the glow or the color or the difference from this side of the orb to that. She is fuming about something. Some way she feels she's been done wrong. She tells me about it, waving her hands, her face angry and her words little daggers, looking for some meat to sink themselves into. I can feel her sense of injustice, her sense of blame and victimhood and rage. I'm excited to share this place with her and really want to help her feel better. I call to her to come across the threshold into the light. I can't wait for her to revel with me in the ease and love that fills the air here. I'm certain that if she can just be in this place with me, her troubles will be put into perspective. She'll be able to see it from all sides and have a bigger view of her experience. She can free herself from her suffering. I beckon again for her to come inside, but she can't hear me. She keeps yelling, and now tears begin to squeeze from the corners of her eyes, giving away the truth that, most of all, she is hurt. The anger is a cover for her pain. I can see it so clearly. It is so obvious. I reach out to her a third time, wanting to hug and comfort her, inviting her inside. The entity next to me gently touches my arm and pulls my attention back into the sphere with her. My friend continues yelling and gesturing, even though I turn my attention away from her and look at my teacher, who explains that if my friend were to step across the threshold, her physical body would not survive the trip. She literally could not survive moving so rapidly from one paradigm to another. She continues, "We can only move into these different realms when all aspects of self are ready for the journey. The spiritual body, emotional body, mental body, and physical body all have to be vibrating together in a frequency close enough to the frequency of the new space in order to move into that space. If any of those are not in resonance, the person simply can't make the journey. It is for the same reason that some people we speak to just can't hear us, or we can't hear some people when they talk. It's like reading the page of a book over and over, not retaining any of it. The words come out garbled, or like the wah-wah of Charlie Brown's teacher. It may as well be another language. It's not going to get through. That's why it's often so tumultuous before big life changes, especially when moving closer to soul work, closer to our true selves. We have to learn to drop the baggage, and that's hard and scary. We have to heal, integrate, learn, and that is incredibly difficult work that can't be rushed. My teacher conveys absolutely no judgment or sense of hierarchy as she explains this to me. It is purely instructional. There is no judgment of my friend, but also no pity for her. There is compassion, but not the subtle positioning that comes along with feeling sorry for someone. The information is pure, calm, and matter-of-fact. She's simply explaining the nature of reality here. Just like there's no judgment around how gravity works, there's no judgment around this either. I awakened from the purple sphere's teaching, quiet and thoughtful. It all made complete sense to me, and in my dream state I was easily inside of that space. Out in the world, in my everyday life, I was not. I didn't magically become someone who could see with clarity, not cast blame, not get caught up in feeling sorry for myself or lashing out, or feeling hopeless and alone. I was always aware of the truth of the lessons, but back in the world of form they became difficult to access. Like all of my experiences, these teachings continue to unspool forward through time, up to and including today. When I was inside of the orbs receiving teachings, it was similar to the space I was in during the velvety, intelligent blackness episode. My consciousness was clear and information was available immediately. Answers arose as I asked the question, not separated by time or by the need for my brain and body and nervous system to process them. Back in the world, I was integrating the information through the medium of time and at my body's pace to incorporate what I'd learned. I certainly have had moments where I find myself back in that space, and with diligent practice it is easier to access, but it seems cumbersome. So much has to be lined up. My physical health, my mental state, my body's level of stress or relaxation, and how distracted I am by some preference that's holding my attention. Sometimes everything aligns, and for an exhilarating moment I am able to see everyone and everything from that space of love and ease, and it is reflected back to me like a beaming smile. It feels like grace. It feels like when I cast my gaze towards heaven in the green sphere and felt an exultant joy. I also think the green sphere, the stretching and pulling and making room, created some space to be able to feel love at that level. I've yet to sustain it, but it's beautiful, and I'm always grateful when I can hold on to that blessing for a while. Finally, we come to the blue orb. This rich, indigo blue sphere was definitely the weirdest. There wasn't a sense of a guide, but instead I had interactions with UFOs, craft, aliens. I'd seen things in the sky before that I couldn't explain. As a kid, that zipping red light high up in space that was reported around the world the next day. And of course there was my Ant-Man, but I hadn't put two and two together yet at all. This was different. When the blue sphere engulfed me, I woke up in a new place. This is still all happening in dreams, I think, but with this sphere, the dreams were even more vivid. Vivid colors and sensations and emotions, the air alive, seemingly more dense and substantial than in the other dream worlds, and certainly more than in waking life. The blue sphere would float down, engulf and overwhelm me, and I would simply come to in a new place. Once I woke up on the ground in a small meadow on top of a mesa I had never been to, surrounded by my familiar pinyon and juniper trees. It was night, it was warm, and I had a sensation of being fully inside my body. This wasn't my disembodied consciousness. It felt very real, very physical. My bare feet were on the earth, and I was looking into the distance, into the sky, my head tilted up, taking in millions of stars above the dark trees around me. Suddenly, one star began to move, and then two, and then a dozen, and then the whole sky was swarming with alive, conscious, intelligent points of light, all interacting and playing together. I was ecstatic. I felt a bursting joy that brought me instantly into rapturous tears. I jumped and waved my hands, crying and laughing, and when they noticed me, they responded. They played with me. When I moved my hands, they matched the motion. They allowed me to conduct their movements as if I was in front of a symphony. I felt so much love, so much connection that I almost could not contain it in my body. The lights were full of joy and love too, and they flowed down out of the stars and swirled around me. As they got closer, they got smaller, so that by the time they were near to me, they were tiny, perfect, flying saucers, all lit up like close encounters of the third kind. We spun around together, faster and faster, and I was giddy and drunk on our communion. The next thing I knew, I was on the ground again, waking up again, looking around at the same meadow, but this time it was empty. I was alone. I looked up at the sky and saw the stars, normal, twinkling, beautiful, static, and cold. I woke up again, that's 3 times now, back in my bed, back to where the world was regular. The blue sphere was full of experiences like this. I am floating above a massive craft that's maybe half a mile in diameter, disc-shaped perhaps, but hard to tell because I can just see the big flat expanse of it from above. I can see it, but I know it's cloaked because it's parked just off Highway 12, settled down into the valley, practically dipping its belly into the Purgatory River, and every now and then a car passes by, its headlights sweeping along the edge of this massive ship. But they don't slow down, and the lights don't jerk to the side with the surprise of seeing a huge spaceship illuminated. So, yes, it has to be cloaked. In the next moment, I am in the cockpit surrounded by glowing lights, red and blue and green and white. I take a look around and it is so incredibly familiar, but I suddenly wonder if I'm allowed to be there. The instant I have that thought, I am gone, back, waking up in my bed. One night I dream I have cancer. Everyone around me is all freaked out, so I put it together that I'm dying. I'm in a wheelchair and I glance into the distance, and there are massive, translucent blue ovals, the size of a 3 or 4 story building, that feel organic, alive like translucent jellyfish, gently pulsing. They are giant ships, no doubt, but oddly they are inside of a massive mountain. They are sentient, alive. They slowly split apart from the top, separating into 3 identical petals, which lower to reveal a core of pulsing white energy. The ecstasy I experienced with that swarm that came out of the stars was here too. I am so deeply excited and feel such love and joy as I witness these gorgeous vessels open themselves. I guide my wheelchair down a pathway and towards the glowing oval ships and notice that there are others around me, all headed in that direction. My time with the blue orb was never scary. It was always thrilling and joyful. One night I found myself watching two almost comically stereotypical aliens. Big gray heads, large eyes, long thin fingers, working over my body on some sort of metallic table with bright lights all around. My awareness was above and behind them to their right. I was peering curiously over their shoulders as they worked. They were struggling with something on my body. One of them eventually noticed me watching and nudged the other. Suddenly they were wearing lab coats, and there was an energy of what I can only describe as shtick. "No, remember?" one said loudly to the other. "It's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey on these models." They both glanced at me to make sure I was watching and then made a big show of unscrewing something like a port that was sticking out of my neck. As they did, my consciousness was sucked back into my body and I woke up. I didn't know what to make of the blue sphere. I still don't know what to make of the blue sphere, but I really loved it. And oddly, many years later, here in the present as I'm writing this, I've developed an area of cancer in my neck, right where the two comedians were working. I don't know what that means. I don't know what to make of it. It's just weird. If things continue as they have been, I imagine that they'll tell me what that's all about at some point. Or maybe I'll go on a crazy cancer adventure and sort it all out. I don't know. From the beginning of these experiences, from the first moments of paralysis, up through my education by orb, I would guess that about 3 months passed. I was less afraid now, but the urgency was still there, maybe heightened even, because of dreams of Nagual sorceresses telling me to get my shit together, and the sense that there had to be some reason all of this was happening. The idea that I needed to prepare myself for something had never left me. Because of that, I decided to make a big change in my life. My house in northern New Mexico with its 30-year mortgage and upkeep and lots of empty space, since I really only lived in 2 rooms anyway, suddenly seemed ridiculous and untenable. And I guess I was supposed to save all the water and the animals and the trees somehow. I didn't know what they, the orbs, my dreams, wanted me to do, but I didn't think that staying safe and comfortable in my modular home on 2 acres was going to cut it. I made the decision to leave. I wanted to sell my house, but was worried it wouldn't happen fast enough, so decided to rent it out. I would give everything away and live close to the land. I wanted to get simple, get present, see what would happen without the distraction of comfort and television and running water. As soon as I made that decision, the feelings of pressure and unease diminished and were replaced by a magical, continuous, undeniable string of synchronistic events. I wasn't altogether unfamiliar with this pattern. I'd felt this before, that feeling of being caught and held when I'd left out of a bad situation. This time, though, it was magnified and heightened. I decided I wanted to live in a yurt, since it would be easy to erect and cheap, and I could pack it up and leave with it whenever this adventure was over. The thought entered my mind, and the next day, on a visit to a local farm, one of the owners mentioned they were selling a yurt. In a couple of weeks, I was purging my possessions, getting ready to move from an 1,800 square foot house with a huge outbuilding into a 265 square foot yurt. I gave away almost everything. I gave away my saddles, including my very first one, smooth and rich and soaked with oil, the leather supple and almost black and smelling like my childhood. I gave away my gardening tools and my chickens and my fishing equipment and my furniture and my books. Well, some books. I could never bear to part with them all. And pots and pans and plants. And my horse. It was wrenching. I cried every day, examining some object filled with memory and attachment to what my life could have been if I could have just been a normal person. I'd finally arrived in a stable place. Nice house, good job, healthy and connected to nature. And now here I was, packing and purging and letting it all go. I let go of a future I thought I could have. I was releasing a version of myself that could have been. I could have had a picket fence and 2.5 kids. But no. Here I was stripping my life down to the basics because some glowing balls of light and Don Miguel were pestering me, keeping me up at night, pushing me to level up. There was a lot of grief around surrendering to that, but the dreams were still there and the synchronicities were fast and furious. Inside the grief there was also excitement, a sense that I was stepping into my real life. I was surrounded by support, and I was also deeply lonely. I stepped across the threshold, crossed into the void, and I knew no one could follow me there. I rented out my house and they were set to move in on the 31st of December, 2012. On December 10th, I still had no place to erect my yurt, no land, no home, and I was square in the free fall of another huge leap of faith. I had removed all of my safety nets, but was supported by such grace that I was not afraid of falling at all. On December 15th, I looked up to the sky and said, "If this is what you want from me, I need a place to live. I need land, it needs to be cheap, and it needs to be now." By the end of the day, a friend contacted me. She knew someone who owned 200 empty acres, and I could live there for $100 a month. On New Year's Eve, I was in my new home. I had no running water, no plumbing, no refrigerator. I did have one small solar panel and a lamp and a wood stove and 2 dogs and endless pinyon and juniper scrub and stars and elk and owls who called at night and coyotes who called in the morning. Orion rose in the winter sky, accidentally framed in my window, and I felt perfectly aligned with everything. Once again, I had arrived, just in the nick of time, just under the wire. This was the first leap I had taken in my life, following the North Star instead of trying to outrun something or someone or myself, and for the first time I felt like a real person. For the next year, I stacked firewood and walked in silence with my dogs and knocked a foot of snow off of my roof and regularly saw lights and craft hovering above me and then changing direction and floating away, up into space. I often left my bed at night, pulled up and out by the vibration that happens with the paralysis, and I traveled, leaving through the little portal at the top of my yurt. I still had dreams about spheres and light and beings teaching me things, but the intensity faded dramatically. I survived 75-mile-per-hour winds and 20 below temperatures, getting up every 3 hours for months on end to feed the fire, and still in the morning, the dog's water was frozen solid in their bowl. One morning I slept through the fire watch and woke up not freezing, not curled up in a tight little ball against the cold, but stretched out and open and soft, with a foot hanging outside the covers, and I knew that spring had arrived. The contrast of working hard to survive the winter against the sudden ease and gentle warmth of the first spring morning is still one of the most glorious feelings I've ever felt. If ever I understood the beauty of duality, it was in that moment. I'd come through the long cold winter, in bed always with socks and a hat and layers, never getting a full night's sleep, experiencing the dread of waking to find the fire fully out, having to lay it again from scratch, whole body shaking violently as I crumpled paper and laid twigs and kindling into a teepee shape, and then the medium logs and then a big one so I wouldn't have to get back up for a while, and hoping to God it didn't collapse and put itself out before it could get going. I'd get it started and then climb back into bed, willing the little flame brighter through clouds of my breath, watching as it got bigger and bigger, staying awake long enough to feel the heat start to penetrate the room, but finally succumbing to my exhaustion and then repeating the whole experience over again. That morning, though, that morning when I'd slept through feeding the fire and woke to find that the room wasn't freezing, that my body wasn't aching, curled tight, that my dogs were stretched out watching me wake, tails thumping contented thumps on the floor, and finding that it was warm inside our little house, I truly understood the blessing of struggle. I would not have any idea how to appreciate a warm morning without the million cold nights that had come before. Me and the dogs slept in that day, and it was, for real, the best sleep of my life. We woke up around noon, and I couldn't heat up water for coffee or breakfast because the wood stove was dead cold, and that was just fine. We ran around outside and felt the sunshine and gloried in the day. In the summer came the flooding monsoon rains that filled up the catch ponds and tried hard to wash out my road. I spent hours gathering rocks and digging ditches to divert the runoff out of the ruts that were getting deeper and deeper. I saw amazing sunsets and sunrises. I built a little circle of lichen-covered stones, and my friends joined me, and we meditated there and prayed and danced and ate chocolate and walked around naked singing Three Little Birds and Santeria, and Jeremiah was a bullfrog at the top of our lungs, our breath hanging in the air and our naked skin bathed in moonlight. My body and my psyche were elevated. I let the rhythms of nature take over. I painted again and laughed and wrote. It was a perfect time, and it became my new model for what was possible. That summer I felt like I was inside of the purple sphere, seeing everything clearly, not holding on to drama or struggle, but truly immersed in the blessing of an easy life. I was sent another dream, an old man, dignified, strong, upright, with smooth red-brown skin, clothed simply in a dark maroon shirt and gray pants and wearing a dusty black hat with a round, flat brim, led me to the edge of a long view. He felt solid, confident, and like he had a sense of humor, a private joke that I wasn't in on. He kept glancing sideways at me with a little halfway grin on his face until suddenly, in a flash, he took my chin into his strong, leathery hands and pulled open my mouth, fingers prying my jaws apart, and applied a local anesthetic to my teeth and gums, way in the back, on the lower right side. He pulled out a pair of shiny silver pliers and put them into my mouth and worked them back and forth and removed my wisdom tooth. He waved my clean white tooth in front of my eyes and then tucked it into the palm of my hands and closed my fingers around it, and we turned back toward the view. There was a big valley stretched out in front of us, and we saw a cow elk standing alert about a third of the way down, looking into the distance. Many miles beyond her, barely visible, there was a thin ribbon of a dirt road, and on it a tiny motorcycle throwing up a plume of dust. She thinks there's danger or something important happening, he said. She doesn't know what's a motorcycle. She doesn't know if she should be afraid of it, try to outrun it, or maybe it's nothing and she should ignore it. Really, it would be easier if it was a wolf. She knows what's a wolf. He squinted at me meaningfully. Either way, it's exhausting scanning the world waiting for a wolf to appear, no? He waited until he was satisfied I understood, then continued. Anyway, the world doesn't want to give you a wolf. The world wants you to realize that there is no wolf, and it is you that bends, and not the spoon. He flashed his eyes at me and chuckled, grabbed my jaw and peered inside my mouth. How's the tooth? No swelling? Good. Now wake up. These dreams and beings were always telling me to prepare, to get ready, to wake up. Here in my yurt on the land with no neighbors and in the silence and connection, I almost felt like I could. One night in late summer, I sat in my circle and looked up at the big full moon. I asked her for a favor. I was so safe and alive and knew that I had big work to do, and I felt ready. I knew that this time with the land and the yurt and the dogs wouldn't last forever. I was on the path, but I wasn't there yet, and it was time to get to moving on. I was in the middle of getting my yoga teacher training certification, and in our studying we'd come across a quote attributed to a nameless sage who'd been asked something like, "How long does it take a soul to evolve out of the cycle of suffering?" The sage replied, "Imagine a mountain 3 miles wide, 3 miles high, and 3 miles long. Once every 100 years, a bird flies over the mountain, holding a silk scarf in its beak, which it brushes across the surface of the mountain. The time it would take for the scarf to wear down the mountain is how long we've been doing this." Well, fuck that. I looked up at that yellow moon rising over the pinyons and junipers and the big stepped mesa in the background, and I asked the moon to put me on a crash course. I must have been feeling myself, because I asked to be taken from A to Z in this lifetime as quickly as possible. I did not want to wait lifetimes to step into myself. I wanted to be fully here, now, and I wanted to work through all of my bullshit and baggage as quickly as I could so that I could get where I needed to go. I had work to do. I wanted to be able to love unconditionally and freely as an act of bravery and faith. Cynicism is boring and fear-based. I wanted love. Love that the universe is made of, shining through my own individual divine collection of atoms and quarks and all of the spaces in between. I was terrified to surrender to that love, but exhausted from the struggle of resistance, from desperately seeking rescue by some other. I wanted the excruciating beauty of falling so deeply in love with everything and everyone that there was no hope for recovery. I wanted to lay down my struggle and dive or slide or slip or sink or float or simply step into the reality of that love. And I prayed that when I finally surrendered, my heart would break into 1,000,000 pieces and I could never put it back together again. "Please," I begged, "please break me open. Please, I know I'm capable of so much love. I want the shortest route possible to becoming a real, actualized human. I want to be able to love as much as I know I can. Bring it on. I can handle it. Come on, shatter me into being." I don't recommend praying that prayer, but if you do, be prepared to have it answered and hold on tight. For more information or to book a one-on-one session with me, visit honeyheart.org.